To join us so we can have a quorum and begin this conversation. So we're talking about media business in Nigeria. How is it, to engage in the media business in Nigeria? If you work in the radio space, you work on TV, you do business with radio and TV, the questions you have, if you listen to the radio, you listen to TV. Hi, Omo Efe, how are you? When, you hear that a radio station was shut down because they said something or they did something, you have questions. So we're going to have those conversations today, and we're going to talk about frequently asked questions, about the media business. Is it the easiest? People see and you think that they are paid so much money and that the media business is booming, but it's not necessarily what you think it is. And some people actually know that journalists and media people are poorly paid, and you wonder, but that station, they play lots of adverts. How come they don't make so much money? You're going to hear about it. But the most important thing is Nigeria are somewhat, for COVID-19, there's been money, this wave of, on-air personalities calling out their media houses and saying, you haven't paid us for 10 months, you haven't paid us for 8 months, stuff like that. And these are questions that you want to ask. How does the media space run? There are people who are of the opinion that an umpire, you cannot be seen to be doing your master's bid. And I'm using the words loosely here because the NBC is a regulatory body that is somewhat a part of the executive arm of the government, the federal government. So it reports to the federal government. Now, how is it not possible that the NBC could be also, working to the tune of the piper?
I think it's my data connection. Okay. So I think the NBC needs to work towards being more independent. I worked there as a director general, and I came under pressure as well. And the way that licenses have been issued in the past, used to find that most of the people who have licenses. Mm-hmm. So hence the commission, and that's one of the areas where I think that it needs to become more independent. But that is something that has to happen by the stakeholders, all the stakeholders engaging the government to push the National Assembly to setting up the NBC to allow it to be more independent, and the confirmation of the whoever heads the NBC should go to the National Assembly, because broadcasting is just like we have in NCC. It doesn't totally isolate you from politics, because politics, look, let's be honest, politics is what it is. We can't run away from it. But be that veneer that you're not directly subject to a ministerial and therefore a political order. Mm-hmm. I had my own fair share of pushback. At some point I was seen as PDP. When I do the things that some of the people in government that I wanted me to do. So he's APC, or he's been captured. So it is a minefield that whoever heads the NBC will have to struggle. But I think that, look, in my own situation, once I put my foot down and said, this is what I was going to do. Maybe I was lucky under the administration, but very rarely in fact, I can't think of when any order came from the Ville that said, we must do this. I said, this is the professional thing to do, and I was going to do it. And if people perceive you that you have that strength of character, then they'll pretty much leave you alone. You hear them say, oh, that one is, just leave him. But if you allow yourself, maybe because of some political thing you also want, and it happens to director generals of government agencies, where we think that if we do what the government thinks, therefore be in the good books of government. Of the government.
I was about to say that because you are a strong character, and you are a professional. So those are two passes for you. But there are people who have held offices, may not necessarily be the NC, but there are people who hold offices that are very sensitive as yours and are not necessarily professionals in that regard. So where does the I'm a professional, this is the professional thing to do come in? Because you would rather be saying, what will my boss think? I don't want to be in the bad books of my boss. let me put you in a tight corner. After you left or before you, I mean, I loved the Tom Daba administration. I was still very young in the journalism industry, but do you see a trend of people like you coming into the business, or is it just more of I was, given a job to do, I'll just do it. Whatever they ask me to do, I'll just do it. Do you see people who are strong characters holding that office going forward, especially under this administration?
Look, I think that it's inevitable. The NBC, I mean, look, under this administration, I think that they, more than any other administration quite recently, understand the power of the media, and because they rode to power largely on the wing of the media. It helped to craft a narrative, so they understand that, and so that I think in a way that kind of makes them more wary of, or more sensitive, should I say, of the narratives within the media space today, whether it's social media or traditional media. So they understand, and pretty much every government would like to have a good press, and they work towards that, either making sure that whoever heads the regulatory bodies will be someone that is compliant to their own interests, but it doesn't serve the general public, the general interest of the country. I think what should be the focus should be, what is the national interest, and let's work towards the national interest. There will be borderline times where you will have we're all political animals, so it is impossible not to have a political leaning. It's not impossible, but your professional ethics, your professional pride, and your professionalism should always triumph. That's how I see it. But it doesn't mean that you will not have or in fact that you will not be perceived to be political or to have some political influence. That's okay. But to answer your question bluntly, I think that the government needs to look at either strengthening the laws in terms of the NBC, as I said, reviewing the NBC more independent. If that is done and answerable to the National Assembly, if that is done, then I think that rather than to a minister or a ministry that's appointed by a government who is more political, but if done that the NBC is reports to the National Assembly, then the issue of the political leaning will be much better handled, because you're answering to the National Assembly, and the National Assembly, even though there might be a majority of one party, but there's usually an opposition, so they will be loud and they'll make necessary noises. So I think it's important for first thing to do is to review the act setting up the NBC to make it more independent of political influence. That's one, especially in terms of licensing process. The fact that when you need a license, you have to know somebody in the villa, know somebody who's close to the president or to the chief of staff. All of those things have been going on for years, and it's not just about this administration. It's happened during my term under a different administration. It happened before the people who. It is that the fact that it's subject to that
man, no man.
To a large extent, you have to be extraordinary character, and you have to be someone who is willing to pay the price, because sometimes doing the right thing can come at a cost to your career or whatever. So, and not a lot of people, if you live in an economy that's very transactional, very bread and butter, very, 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 it will only be very few people who will decide, I've had enough, I'm leaving. But it's fix the law first, as I say, review the law, and I think it strengthens whoever is going to be appointed to now know that he has a good ground to stand on.
Let's talk about the law. The recent review or the recent addition to the NBC code has had a lot of people talking, especially with the one that was recently introduced by the Minister of Information. A lot of people are saying that this is a sneaky way of bringing in the bill that everyone had kicked out or tossed away back into the NBC code. So the NBC is somewhat doing the bidding of the federal government yet again. I'm trying to understand what that code really means, the new one, because, I mean, the hate speech bill is something that Nigerians kicked out because they felt like it was targeted at a certain group of people.
Yep.
But here we are, it's being infused into the NBC code. What are your thoughts? The moment you heard about it, when the minister unveiled it, what were your thoughts as someone who's worked in the NBC and someone who still is in the media business?
I think that, that portion of that amendment needs to go. And, we always do these things where we say we have good intention to check hate speech. But, as people often say, the road to hell is paved with good intentions. If you look at the reading and the drafting of that particular section, it is too restrictive. It doesn't even have definition. It doesn't even define what hate speech is. So it's pretty much left to the subject of whoever sits in a position to say, oh, this is hate speech. That's not possible. Or to say that the reason of one particular instance, that not to embarrass the government or senior government officials. The truths can be embarrassing. Be real. The truth. You're naked or you're not well dressed, and you're not well dressed for a particular place. It could be embarrassing to you, but it's the truth. You are not. And so to now criminalize the fact that someone says something that may be embarrassing, you cannot criminalize that. That is not criminal. That is not hateful. So we often run into these situations where we try to say, oh, because everybody agrees that hate speech is something that needs to be dealt with. Hate speech is horrible. But so because we all say that, then you now say, oh, we're dealing with hate speech. But that's not how you deal with hate speech. The first thing you do about hate speech is to define what hate speech is. Give examples of what it is. You know what I mean? And in my own definition, in my time of working on the NBC, I've always insisted and said that hate speech is not information or speech which is embarrassing to someone. Hate speech is not something which is the truth. Hate speech is not something that you say about an individual. The character of hate speech is not, it should not be determined, or it's not defined by when you say something about one individual. Even if that thing you say about that individual could be wrong. Yeah. But that is not hate.
So at what point does a criticism from a person or a group of people or Nigerians become hate speech? Because it looks like every time somebody's criticizing the government of the day, it is hate speech. It's categorized as that.
I totally reject that. That is not the accepted framework. I wouldn't even say definition of what hate speech means. Hate speech, it's not, as I said, does not reflect speech made against a person or an individual, or even a government, especially a government. The role of the individual is to criticize the government. That's your number one role. Actually, more than praising your government, your first thing you should do is to criticize your government. That's your number. Otherwise, government becomes a tyranny.
But has there been room for that to happen under this? Under the Goodluck administration? Let's forget about the Obasanjo administration. The media probably may not have grown to this point where we are as vocal as we are today. Yep. But between the Goodluck administration and the Buhari administration, has there been room for that to happen without you being called in for questioning? Because that seems to be the order of the day. Has there been?
I think, like I said, I think there's a climate, and there's a growing climate. This climate of excessive sensitivity to criticism. As I said, there's context to it. The context to it is that you had a political party, you had elections, you had a group of people who pretty much rode on the wings of very favorable, to understand the media, and now you're in power. And but that's it. If you look at democracies, if you go to the UK, when the Tories are in power, Labour will be abusing them. when Labour is in power, Tories will be abusing them. That's the role of government. It's not something you should accept it. I think that the difficulty here is that we're refusing to accept criticism. Criticism actually is very helpful, because if I don't tell you that the road to my village is bad and you should fix it, it's your responsibility. And I tell you that you're not doing your job, that and people maybe have lost their lives or been injured or lost their belongings, and I come out and I abuse you as a government, it's your responsibility. You cannot be offended as government. Government cannot be offended as a government. There's no big law or tradition for a government to say, I'm offended. No, you can't take offense. Because what you mean to take offense means that you're offended by your citizens. And you cannot be offended by your citizens that you're supposed to protect and serve and provide for. You can't be. Now, and this is where hate speech comes in. If I circle or I categorize a group of persons and I call them and I say, if I say, for example, my name is Emeka, and I say Emeka is a total idiot, I curse him out. That is, no matter how hateful that might sound to Emeka, but that's not hate speech. But when I say, because Emeka is Igbo, and I say all Igbos are this, that, then it becomes, so it's only when you bring it together as a group that you can now categorize it as possibly within the remit of speech. But not when you're abusing an individual or abusing a government. Government cannot take offense. It is not legally possible for a government to take offense, especially take offense from his own citizens. It's not, there's no legal basis for it. But my own thing within this, and this is why I find this particular sections in the amendment extremely troublesome, because it criminalizes, or at least it attempts to criminalize, and I think very many people have gone to court and are challenging that. It attempts, it does two things. It takes, as you said in the intro, it takes the hate speech bill, which Nigerians have, rightly condemned, and it tries to, through the back doors, smuggle it in within the MBC. And I don't even think MBC has the capacity. I've worked there to, they will make the noises, but I don't think ultimately they have the capacity to do all of that work that's required. Because it puts the MBC in a very odious position where you are the policeman, you are the judge, you're the jury, and so it doesn't, it will leave the MBC too much within the political realm, and it will cause trouble for the MBC. Because what it means is that when someone starts to criticize another political party or people in government, government changes. We've seen it, where a lot of people in PDP are now in APC, a lot of people in APC have now gone. So they keep going back and forth. And governments change. So even if it's an APC government today, it's a Nigerian government. They're doing it for Nigerians. So the moment you have a change where maybe PDP or SDP or whatever party comes up tomorrow, and you find yourself on the opposing end, that same law you put in can be used against you. And that's the danger. So a lot of people sometimes think that, I'm doing this now for this particular, and that's why some of us say targeted legislation or regulation is extremely bad. It is bad because ultimately it leads to consequences that will, that whatever the good intentions you have set out to do, it damages the whole country as a whole. So I think that's why, that's why I think that we need to be very careful. And I'm happy to hear that there's talk even within the broadcasting community. The IBAN have spoken, Born have spoken to call for the review of this amendment. It is not good. I haven't worked there. I don't think it's good for them either, because it puts them in a very in a situation where they are, they become political. They become to judge political matters, and that's not good at all for a broadcast regulator.
Let's move away from the regulations. I know it's a hot case. I'm sure you heard what happened with Nigeria Info Lagos and, you know, the 5 million naira fine. That's a whole kettle of fish on its own. But let's talk about the media business in itself. The media in Nigeria seems to be taking a hit. It's been taking a hit before COVID came. Media houses we've seen on social media, media workers coming out to say haven't been paid for 7 months, 8 months, you know, we're working. And the guys who are in charge of these media houses are saying we're also not making money because it seems like the media space is stifled in Nigeria. And so it makes people wonder, is there really free speech in Nigeria? Are we really practicing the profession? Are we allowed to do it, to follow it to the latter? Or is it just because, you know, again, my other question, so I don't forget it. There are people who have asked why all of a sudden most of the media houses in Nigeria are run or owned by politicians, but fronted by normal persons like you and I. Does that not skew the whole idea of a media that is supposed to have free speech or, be able to be unbiased? How does that work?
I think you've asked the question and you've answered the question as well, because this is the context you painted about, you know, whether there's free speech, sufficient free speech in the broadcasting or in the media space. And whether there's enough freedom and space, both in terms of commercial success, and the fact that a lot of the people who own the media are politicians or connected very closely to politicians, and therefore, so that's the answer. The answer is that.
Oh, hold on. You're saying that the reason why we're not progressing or we're not doing well as the media in Nigeria is because there are too many politicians running these media houses.
Yes, it's tied to the fact that the firmament, the climate in which, and if you look at, and I'll give you some background to this, a lot of the media people are doing what we call self-censorship. Okay, because of who ultimately owns them and who they report to. So once you see this vertical tie between a media organization and a political godfather, because I need you, okay? So my primary objective of setting up this radio or TV station is not so much to make money, but to provide me a platform to push my interest. So, and they pay for these things. And therefore, the people who work in the media become spoon-fed. They become, you know, by character, I hate to say this, the envelope, brown envelope. They become,
that was where I was about to go to.
They become characterized by that because everybody is now serving not a consumer interest, but they're serving a political interest. So I can buy you, whether it be NTA, and NTA News is really just government news. They're not interested.
And that's detailed for every state media, by the way.
So when I worked as a regulator, when it comes to doing election time, you'll find that, don't take advert from the opposition party, or don't let this person come on. And that's revenue. Don't allow, even on a phone-in show, you know, curate the calls. Don't allow as you said, the full fervor, the full narrative of opposition, of everything to come in, because media by its very nature thrives on a conflict of ideas, whether it be drama. The worst kind of movie would be a movie where there's just one story. You know, the best movies are the movies where there's a conflict of ideas, bad guy, good guy, you know, it turns out to be a bad guy, you know, and drives people to theaters. And that's what raises revenue. So you need that space. You need to work under that firmament to be able to, as it were, energize the workforce and energize the space. And there's a trickle-down effect into how, whether it be the reporters who are working for that news platform to pursue news stories outside of this political space. So it's almost as if I work for ABC TV or ABC newspaper, and, you know, my owner is, you know, chief so person who is connected to PDP. And he's been spoon feeding us, paying our salary for a year or whatever, because he needs us to protect his political stories and narratives that would challenge the status quo that he wants to defend. Do you know? Get my point?
I'm just going to go straight to questions. So those who are watching us, I'm sure you have questions. Just drop your questions. We will read them. There's a question mark at the bottom of the screen. Just click on it, and then you can, type your question out. But we're going to hopefully have Mr. Emeka Mba come back quickly so we can ask questions. I see I see Collins Teke. Hello, Collins. So all the guys who are joining me, we were talking about the media space in Nigeria and the NBC code, what the regulations have been like, and I've learned so much in this conversation. Hopefully my guest can come back so we can continue with that conversation. He's told us a lot of things about, what he thinks the NBC space should be doing. The NBC should not be allowed to, be told what to do by the government of the day. The NBC should be seen as unbiased. Professionals are supposed to be running the NBC. A lot of things that need to be done, and he feels that the new introduction or the amendment of the NBC code needs to be thrown out. He says that it's going to, one way or the other, make the whole media business going up and down. And I think it's because it's raining outside. These things happen all the time. I see Reverend Laurie. Hi, Reverend Laurie. Thank you for joining my live feed. I'm so sorry. The internet has been very funny today. I think it's because of the rains, and the rain has just started. We're going to have rains all through September. I wish my internet luck. So quickly, let me go back to the question I was about to ask. With all of the things that are happening in the media space in Nigeria, how do you think that the outside world views us, and how can we better improve our the media space in Nigeria so that we can also be players? Because Nigerians leave here and become really good at what they do when they leave this country. They become top journalists, they're reporting, and you just be wondering, how come these journalists didn't do the same thing while they were here in Nigeria? People always tell me, you cannot go and do investigative journalism. Don't sit down in that studio and ask nonsense questions. And I'm like, I don't have the kind of security and insurance that an Amampo would have, or the guy in ABC News would have. I don't have that. So what are the improvements that we need to make in the Nigerian media space so that people can really do their job and feel like they're committed to doing this job and making sure that they deliver?
I think for me, there are no easy answers, but it starts with journalists themselves. As I said, deciding, because they're within a certain comfort zone at the moment. And the causes of it are, varied, as we said, because people are not being well paid. And people are not being well paid because the fundamental reason why people are setting up these organizations, these news platforms, media platforms, are basically to protect or to promote a certain narrow self-interest, rather than commercial interests or larger public interests. So once you operate within that narrow band of interest, it is obviously keeps you, you don't have the space to maneuver and to do other things. And that's what I said. If my patron, the person who funds my news organization, is someone who is closely aligned to a political party, and I want to cover, say, what's going on in another senatorial zone, or I have a breaking news, or I have covered this, I have done this report, and it comes up to my editor, and my editor says, "Oh, I hope you know that this person you just did the report on is friends with Chief Emeka, and therefore, you
can't run the story.
In that space, run the story. And running the story means that you're going to get more people interested in the news. And if more people are interested in the news, you get more eyeballs. More eyeballs, you get potentially more advertisers and more money. And you get better pay. But if you're within this narrow interest as defined by your owner, who, and this is not to say that even in the Western world there are no, politically leaning magazines or news platform. There, it's. I don't think that any news platform is without some form of bias. It could be class, it could be ethnic, political. I don't think so, but there's a wider public interest in which they attach their narrow interest to. I don't know that you get what I'm saying, but in our space, find extremely narrowly. That's where the problem lies. So I think that the first thing that the journalists need to do is actually to get out, try and get out of that space. And I'm confident that that's happening because of the
but there seem to be more of those spaces in Nigeria right now. There seems to be more of those spaces. I mean, those are the places where people have more jobs. We're having more of these TV radio stations coming up.
That's my point.
I didn't us do anything today, but I think we got the best part of the juicy part of the stories.